Welcome, everyone. I am Tangier, and this is Transparency Saves Lives, where we are creating safe spaces for healing and empowerment. Welcome to my podcast. So, today I want to talk about being diagnosed with ADHD and PMDD at the big old age of 35. At the time of this recording, I just received my diagnoses a week ago and have started my Adderall journey, and the difference is mind-blowing. And so if you watched last week's episode, I went through my in-depth mental health journey, and that was before receiving my official ADHD diagnoses. So getting this diagnosis and then reflecting over everything that I talked about in my last episode as far as being diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and having what appeared to be manic episodes, and just all of the ups and downs and all of the different medications. Finally getting an ADHD diagnosis has been a breath of fresh air. I kind of thought that I had ADHD, I would say, for a couple of years now, but I wasn't sure because I struggled with anxiety and depression. So I wanted to make sure that anxiety wasn't the real thing that was keeping me from being able to focus and be motivated, as well as depression. So my biggest focus was getting the right medication that would stabilize my anxiety and depression. And so I did that. I can't remember if I mentioned in the last episode that I currently take lamotrigine, which is a mood stabilizer, and Lexapro. Generic version is citalopram. Those two medications I have been taking for a couple of months now, and they have worked wonders for my mood up until right before my period, and but they have not helped with my motivation, my organization, and my ability to be consistent in starting projects and following through with them. So because I noticed that I was still struggling with those three things, after feeling like I got my emotional state more stable, I talked to my psychiatrist. I told her that I wanted to explore more in depth about ADHD. So I ended up speaking with an ADHD coach. She actually reached out to me on Threads. Her name is Dr. Regine Batil, and she's actually a physician. Her Instagram is MD Coach Today, and I'll put that at the bottom of the screen. And so she reached out to me. We had a quick discovery call that led to a more in-depth call. And long story short, due to her medical background, she was able to basically tell me, you definitely check off all the boxes for someone with executive dysfunction, and you should really push to get a proper diagnosis from your doctor. And so that's what I did. I had a quick conversation with my psychiatrist. I told her that my anxiety and my depression is pretty stable except for around the time of my period, which I'll come back to. But I'm still having issues with organization and all these different things. And then we went through a quick questionnaire, and she said, well, that's enough for me to diagnose you. And so I had this diagnosis and my Adderall prescription. And so the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because I want to go in depth through all of the things that I went through up until today and how my diagnosis has been missed. And so I'm going to start from the beginning. It's kind of long. This might end up being a long podcast, but I'm sure that there is someone out there who either also got an adult diagnosis of ADHD, or you're looking to get a diagnosis. So I'm about to lay it out. So bear with me. And here we go. So the reason I was never flagged, so to speak, for ADHD is because as a child, I did extremely well in school. I had good grades. I was in the TAG program, which stands for Talented and Gifted. In high school, I was in honors classes, AP. Even in college, I graduated with honors. So I didn't struggle in school. I was not a behavioral issue. I was always I did really well in school. So there was nothing at school for teachers to be like, well, maybe she has ADHD, or maybe we should, look at this closer for her. And even at home, I would say more my ADHD symptoms more so presented at home, which is also how it is now that I'm an adult. At home, I was My grandmother often called me, she would always say, your head is always in the clouds. I was definitely a daydreamer. So in school, even though I was not, I didn't have any behavior issues and I didn't have any issues with getting my work done, I was often daydreaming. And of course, teachers don't know that you're daydreaming. And then if your work is still getting done and still getting done well, then there's no reason to even like keep an eye on me or pay attention to help me snap out of what I'm daydreaming in class. So I did a lot of daydreaming. My Most of my childhood was spent living in like this dream fantasy world, and I would have these like soap opera novellas in my brain. I was having a party in my head. I was always scatterbrained, constantly losing things as a child. Um, I was often called a dumb blonde in school because like I was so like airy and like spaced out and just not always very present. Procrastination for me was the name of the game. So, like I said, even though I was getting my work done and I was getting it done well, it was also getting done at the last minute. And that just seemed to be like my thing. So, like, no one said, well, this looks like it could potentially be an issue, because it wasn't an issue, because I was getting my work done well, even though I was getting it done at the last minute, oftentimes the day before it was due. In school, I didn't have any issues with like routines or structure, because routines and structure was provided for me. So, you have to wake up at a certain time to get to school by a certain time. You have different classes at a certain time. Your homework is due by a certain time. So, my life was structured for me. So, I didn't realize that I had an issue with structure myself. Like, of course, no one would notice that because my life was structured for me. I was a kid. I did often get like so caught up in things that I was interested in as a kid. I remember more so in high school that I would forget to eat. And I would just, like, my grandmother would just be like, your head is always in the clouds. How do you forget to eat? But, I was a kid. I mean, I was a teenage kid, but still, like, you're the adult here. Make sure I eat. But that's neither here nor there. So, I did have that level of absent-mindedness and being hyper focused on things that I was interested in, but it was more so seen as, what's the word? Just kind of like being careless at home, not so much as this is a problem. I also dealt with rejection sensitivity, more so when it came to like my romantic relationships. Being rejected by like a potential, boyfriend or a guy that I liked in high school, I took it very, very hard. If you watched my last episode, I mentioned how in 12th grade I spiraled into a depression because the guy that I was trying to get back, because I broke up with him, he had moved on and didn't want me anymore. And so that was I didn't realize that was a part of rejection sensitivity. And then also the fact that I craved chaos in my relationships as a child or as a teenager. That is actually, I discovered that's part of dopamine chasing. So I didn't realize that the reason why, the good relationships, I considered them to be boring. And then the toxic relationships, with the bad boys, I was more excited about that. I was always chasing after guys that didn't quite like me, but I liked them more than they liked me. And I didn't realize that I was chasing after dopamine. So of course that's also something that is like internal, or you just think that, oh, this is a high school teenage girl thing, she'll grow out of it. So again, that wasn't something that would have caught anyone's eye. My room, oh my gosh, my room as a child was always trashed. My desk, I remember having a desk. I had to be in like, I think it was like late elementary school, somewhere in middle school. I had a desk in my room and it was always full of papers that I forgot about, didn't even need. It was just all my room and my closet and my desk was just always trashed as a child. But again, you just see that as, you're just being a kid, you're being careless, it'll pass. Then I get into my adulthood after college. So I had a period after college where I wasn't working. But I had all these like big ideas of things that I wanted to do. And that's when I started to realize that I was kind of floundering a little bit, but it still wasn't a huge issue. More so, I was more so struggling with anxiety and depression, which I have learned that a lot of girls and women who struggle with ADHD often get misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression. because the things that we struggle with as far as executive dysfunction contributes to the anxiety and depression. So after graduating college, and again, I graduated, college with honors, never had any issues in school or with classes. Yes, I got things done at the last minute, but things got done. But after I graduated and I was trying to start my adult life, I always felt like whenever I was trying to get things done, it was like I was pushing up against an invisible wall. Or I've described it before as like trying to start a car that just won't turn over. It's like, I know I need to do this. I actually really do want to do it, but I just can't make myself do it. And I don't understand what that is. And I just thought it had something to do with, anxiety and depression. So it was always just kind of more so focused on managing that and learning coping mechanisms for that, not necessarily realizing that I was struggling with things that executive function. It also became more apparent when I got married and started a family of my own. I can't remember all of the reasons as to why my ex-husband, pinpointed ADHD on me. I do know that he had a diagnosis of ADHD, and so it makes sense that he would be able to identify it better and see more clearly how I had some of, I guess similar issues that he may have had. To me, his ADHD always looked like I guess just being angry because I didn't know what I was dealing with. Unfortunately, I was in an abusive relationship. I didn't understand how, ADHD medication could affect the person. And long story short, so I still didn't understand really why he said or why he thought I had ADHD. But I do remember speaking to my psychiatrist, and this was like after I got out of the psych ward the first time. And you would have to, refer back to the last episode to kind of hear the details surrounding that. But after I got out of the psych ward the first time and started seeing a psychiatrist, I did mention to him that I thought maybe I had ADHD, and I, gave him a list of all the things that I was struggling with that I recognized and that my ex-husband pointed out, and he kind of just brushed it to the side. He was like, you kind of might have it, but we'll treat you for it with Wellbutrin. That way it can take care of the depression and the ADHD, if you do have it. But as I mentioned in my last video, it did not work. It became even more apparent once I became a mom, and then I will get to that later because that kind of ties into the things I'm going to talk about next, which is how it presented in my job and my home life. So when I did finally get my career off the ground, I started working in property management, doing different roles that had a lot of moving parts. That's when I started to feel overwhelmed and stressed with all of the different moving parts that I had to manage. And again, I still did a great job managing it, but it was a struggle to manage. And I did have several bosses mention to me, like, you probably have ADHD, but it wasn't like this huge thing because I was still getting my work done, and I was, again, still getting my work done well. But I always felt anxious and overwhelmed, not realizing that was due to trying to manage all of the different things and struggling with that. I just thought it was anxiety. So again, that's what I was more so seeking help for, was anxiety, which caused the depression. And then my rejection sensitivity, it caused me to be more people pleasing, and being a people pleaser made me a perfectionist, and being a perfectionist made me like always cross all my T's and dot my I's, which again made me a really great worker, but it also stressed me out because I was always overthinking and overanalyzing and over checking, which again made me very accurate and precise in my work, but it stressed me out because I was like, oh, I don't want to forget anything. I know I can be forgetful. I got to make sure I write everything down, and did I do this and did I do that? And it was just a constant, like, my brain was turning because I know that I could struggle with forgetting things, and I knew that in my line of work, forgetting something was not going to be an excuse. So I always made sure I had a notebook. I was always, writing my to-do list down for the day. Oh, I need to follow up with this person on this day. Like, I was trying to manage and cope, but I didn't know or realize that I was trying to manage and cope with my executive dysfunction. I just thought that I was trying to manage and cope with the demands of the job. I also had a struggle with like time management and prioritization. So again, I said I was always getting my work done, but the bulk of my work would always get done towards the end of the day, which then caused me to stay at work later, which then added to my stress and overwhelm because now I'm working longer hours, getting work done that should have been done, either been done during the 8 hours or should have been prioritized for the next day and put at the top of my list. So I always, like I said, I always end up staying late, which then added to my stress, which then added to my overwhelm and eventually to my burnout. As far as my home life, my home was always a mess. And I'm not ashamed to say it. Like so many people, judge people for not being able to keep a clean house. And sometimes it is laziness, but when it comes to ADHD, it's not laziness. It truly is overwhelm. Um, I always did everything based on how I felt that day. Like I was always, always, always tired. And so for me, I always felt like, well, I need to prioritize rest because, before me and my now husband got together, I was a single mom. So I was trying to manage working and being a mom. And, housework just was at the bottom of my list for me. And so my house was always a mess. And then when I did attempt to clean it, I could never really focus on cleaning one area. So I would start on one area. Let's say I was cleaning the bathroom. And then as I'm putting things back where they belong in the bathroom, and let's say I'm putting things in my linen closet, I noticed that my linen closet is a mess. So now I'm organizing the linen closet. Then I come across a piece of paper that belongs on my bookshelf and I put it with the stack of papers that's in my bookshelf. But I'm like, these papers don't belong here. These papers need to go in my closet that's in my living room. So I open the closet and put it with those papers. I'm like, I actually need to go through all these papers because why do I have all these papers in my closet? So now I'm spending the time that I had set aside to clean my bathroom and maybe my kitchen. I'm using that time organizing my closet, going through papers, which is not a part of the plan. And then by the time I finish doing that, either the day is over because I can never sit and just focus on it anyway. I was always constantly getting up, moving around. I got to be looking at YouTube while I'm doing something. So I'm constantly looking for YouTube stuff, which is taking away from my, focus to be able to complete the task. And then by the time I do complete the task, it's the end of the day or it's time to do something else. And I'm tired and I don't feel like now cleaning the kitchen or finishing cleaning the bathroom. And so I was always leaving behind a trail of, things that were undone unless I had this like huge burst of energy or unless I had people coming over. And so that was another huge thing for me that I didn't realize was a part of ADHD. I always realized that I needed external motivation. So if I knew I was having someone come over who I didn't want to see my house in shambles, oh, you best believe that house was getting cleaned in one day and from top to bottom. And I was going to stay focused. So I needed that pressure, that dopamine release of like, oh, we got to get this done. We got to get it done now. Like I always needed like solid deadlines. And for me, in that case, the solid deadline was someone is coming over to your house tomorrow at this time. And so it needs to be done by then. I also recognized that no matter how much sleep I got, I always felt tired. And I would always need a midday nap. Like it didn't matter. I could go to bed at a decent time, wake up at a decent time and still be tired. I have realized more recently that if I go to bed by 9:30, it's a lot better, but it is still a struggle towards the end of the day. And now that I'm on my ADHD medication, I don't feel as tired in the middle of the day. And so I have learned that my exhaustion is a result of my brain always being on a 100 and always thinking about different things and doing different things and getting distracted. Like I'm always constantly moving but not getting anything done. Which leads me to my next point where I've noticed that a lot of times I'll pace through the house absent-mindedly. If I'm talking on the phone with someone and we're having a long conversation, if I'm not FaceTiming them, I'm most likely pacing through the house or multitasking. A lot of times it'll look like I'm walking through the house aimlessly because I'll be on my way to do something and then I'll think about something else like, oh, I need to do this. Or I'll see something that distracts me and then I'll start doing that. And I'm like, oh yeah, I need to go back to do that other thing that I was supposed to be doing. Or I'll start off doing something and then completely forget what I was doing. So I'm like, well, let me go back to what I was doing before. And then when I go back to what I was doing before, I all of a sudden remember what I started or what I was walked off to do, which is so frustrating because I constantly feel like I'm walking back through the house. And it's funny because I do it so much that my cat, I have 3 cats, and my gray cat, he is crazy. He chases my feet. like that's when he helps me be aware of the fact that I'm pacing, because when I start pacing is when he starts to chase my feet, because he's like, oh, this is playtime, she's walking back and forth, let me run up on her. And so I'm like, okay, let me go sit down somewhere, or let me stop walking back and forth aimlessly. So again, not realizing that that was a result of ADHD. And then going into motherhood, since we're talking about my home life, motherhood has been exhausting, and I have dealt with so much mom guilt because I didn't understand why being a mother was so hard, when I love being a mother. I have fun being a mother, but it's also stressful. And now I understand it's because I'm always juggling so many different things. And then, my child is a completely different person. She is a full extrovert, so she, wants a lot of attention. And so I'm always feeling like my brain is on a swivel. It's like, oh my God, I'm doing this and I got to think about this. But then my child is over here, man, mommy, can you play with me? Mommy, what fun things are we going to do today? And it's just like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. And I didn't realize that my struggles with parenting were a result of ADHD, and realizing that has helped me be more kind to myself. It has helped me understand that I have to schedule time with my daughter to where I understand that I'm not thinking about anything else. I need to stay off my phone. Like, this is me and my daughter time, so that she can get what she needs, and so that I can have the mental capacity to be able to give her what she needs. I also really struggle with like discipline and being consistent in discipline. And I realize it's because I often forget what I've told her. So a lot of times she has gotten into the habit of asking me the same thing over and over and over again, because she has learned subconsciously that my answer might change because my mood might be different, or I might just be like, oh, okay, whatever, or I might even completely forget the answer that I gave her earlier. And so that has made being consistent with discipline a lot harder. I feel like, she doesn't get in trouble until it's like something big. And I feel like that's not fair, like, especially when it's something that I could have nipped in the bud earlier, like, no, we're not going to do this. Stop asking me this over and over again. But because I'm not fully aware, it doesn't become like a huge issue until it's a big issue. And so that's something that I'm working through, is being more present. And the ADHD, the Adderall actually helps me to do that, to be more present, to not forget things that I've told her before, so that I can remind her, like, hey, what did I just say 5 minutes ago before you just asked me that question? So that is starting to get a little better. But again, I've only been on the Adderall for a week, but I have noticed that difference. It's also been harder to keep her on a schedule if I have to maintain her schedule. So what my husband has done, which I completely appreciate him for, is, giving her specific, hey, this is your morning routine, this is your bedtime routine. When you hear, your alarm go off, that means it's time for you to go to bed, or that means it's time for you to take a shower. And so while it's still hard for me to keep her on track, because I recognize that she has ADHD symptoms as well. So even though the alarm might go off, she still might not do what she's supposed to do. The fact that the system is there for her, it does help her to be a little more self-sufficient when I'm not able to stay on top of her to make sure she's on top of what she's supposed to do. So like, being an ADHD mom, managing an ADHD child, that's going to take some work on my half. But I thank God that I do have a husband that is, he is more disciplined, he is organized, and he's able to pick up the slack where I fail, in that category. And then lastly, the biggest thing that really helped me realize that, okay, I have ADHD most likely, and I really need to focus on getting a diagnosis so I can get the help that I need, was when I became an independent contractor and started working for myself. That's when everything fell. I'm in debt, or I don't want to say I'm in debt. I've accumulated debt, just due to poor money management, and it's because I now do not get paid on a schedule. Again, that routine, like, oh, okay, I get paid every 2 weeks, and I know I need to make this stretch for 2 weeks. Now I might get paid twice in 1 week, or, so there's no consistency in my pay. So it's harder in my brain to kind of like plan more for the future. There is no boss to tell me when things need to be done. There are no deadlines. I don't have coworkers depending on me to get my work done so that they get their work done. Literally everything is based on me, and that has been a struggle. Like I think I mentioned earlier in this video or in this podcast episode that I thought that I would be happier and that things would be easier once I became a business owner. I thought that it was more so the stress on the job that was overwhelming me and negatively impacting my mental health. I didn't realize that it was my own internal struggle. So I carried my own internal struggle from, my 9 to 5 job into my business. And while yes, I was less stressed because I didn't have as many things to worry about or to juggle, I still wasn't happy. I was still depressed. I was still anxious. I absolutely loved what I do. As a birth and postpartum doula, I absolutely loved it, but I was still struggling with the administrative things, like staying on top of my taxes. I still haven't paid my business taxes yet. Keeping track of receipts. Like I started off, like when I became a business owner and ventured off, I was on top of it. And again, that has to do with like the novelty of something new and that dopamine release when you have that novelty there. But once the novelty wore off, I slacked off on keeping track of business receipts and tracking everything. So, now I'm going to have to backtrack, and then that's going to take more work. And because that's going to take more work and more mental energy, it's something that I keep pushing off until the last minute. And so that was the thing that really, really made me open my eyes to like, okay, this is still a problem. This clearly has nothing to do with, working a 9 to 5 work versus being a business owner. I have a problem. And like my business coach noticed it. She would always say like, you have ADHD and you need to do things a certain way. And I don't always listen. So it took me a while to just be like, all right, I'm going to do things your way because you're the expert here. And clearly I have a problem. So I'm going to need to do it this way. But that was the big kicker for me. And being a business owner for the last year and a half and being an independent contractor, despite, losing the income and, accumulating debt, it was actually what I needed to be able to truly, truly focus on my mental health. I'm not sure that I would be on the right medication if I hadn't taken that break to still see that, okay, my anxiety and depression is not situational, is not just based on my job. This is an internal thing. My lack of focus, my lack of ability to follow through and to be organized and to be motivated to get things done has nothing to do with stress, although stress compounded that issue. This is an internal issue. And once I got my, anxiety and depression under control, again, I still noticed like I'm still having an issue with getting things started. I just no longer feel depressed about the fact that I'm not getting things started. And so that is what led me here to being 35 with an ADHD diagnosis. And like I said, I know episode is going to be probably longer than the last ones, but I really wanted to go through everything so that if you yourself are struggling, that you'll be able to see that you're not the only one struggling, and advocate for yourself to get the diagnosis that you need. Research. I was on TikTok and watching videos of other women who help enlighten me that, the mess that I have in my room is called a doom pile, and that my issue with like not being able to complete tasks in a timely fashion has to do with time blindness. Like they gave me the words to be able to better communicate what I was struggling with so that I could get the right diagnosis. And then that leads me to my next diagnosis. So in my last episode, I talked about how I was diagnosed by my current psychiatrist, who's actually a nurse practitioner. She diagnosed me with a unidentified or unspecified mood disorder because I didn't quite meet the criteria for depression and I didn't quite meet the criteria for bipolar disorder. And so she gave me an unspecified mood disorder, which is how I ended up getting on the mood stabilizer. When I started my mood stabilizer, I noticed the week before my period that I felt like really angry and agitated, like rage, which I've never felt before. Normally it's depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. So she told me to keep an eye on it. And she was like, if that continues or if you notice that pattern next month, then we can go ahead and give you a diagnosis of PMDD. So the following month, I didn't experience rage, but I did experience depression and suicidal ideation, even though I was taking the same medication. And so also last week, not only did she give me the diagnosis of ADHD, she also gave me the diagnosis of PMDD, which I researched and discovered that there is a correlation that 46% of women who have ADHD also have PMDD. So this entire time, my anxiety and depression has been a result of the struggles I have with ADHD, and on top of that, been exacerbated by my cycle. So yeah, I'm just glad that I finally have a diagnosis that makes sense. I finally have the medication that I need. And so my current plan now is the week before my period and the week of my period, I will be increasing my mood stabilizer. So currently I take 25 milligrams of lamotrigine. We are increasing my lamotrigine to 50 milligrams during the week before my period and the week of my period to help mitigate the PMDD and the mood fluctuations, and hopefully that will work. But I'm just so glad to finally have the correct diagnosis so that I can really start setting my life up in ways that make sense for me without the guilt of feeling like a failure. So I know that was a lot. Again, if you're watching this and you identify with some of the things that I've said between this video and last video, I really want to encourage you to get the help that you may need, whether that's seeking a therapist or a psychiatrist and getting on medication. Advocate for yourself. If that means you have to keep switching doctors until you get the right one who hears you and takes your concerns seriously, then I definitely recommend that you do that. So again, until next time, remember that your story matters and you deserve to have it heard, because transparency saves lives.